Hi guys, and welcome to sarahstexturecrafts.com. This is a tutorial to show you how to make felted rope. It's very simple. We're going to use some wool fibre, and then you can decorate them afterwards with your choice of decoration. I've sewn on to this particular one some little bits of lace and a button on one end, creating a loop at the end of our felted rope, and I'll show you how to do that. On this one I've got some beads and some lightly felted pieces there to make sort of flowers. This one, beads and a fancy button. This one, small colourful buttons. And then this final one is just to show you that you can be as fancy as you like or as simple as you like with your finishing, and we'll get to that a bit later after we have felted our bracelet. So let me show you what we are working with. I'm working with wool top, so this is merino. This is about a 50cm length, and this will shrink right down. If I take that off, you can see, if I hold this up, it will shrink down probably by half. There we go, we can see that all in frame, by half, to create our felted rope. And not only that, but in its thickness as well, you can see that it will really shrink down. All we're going to use today to create our felted rope is some soap and water. It needs to be fairly warm water, and we're just going to use a drop of washing up liquid. You could also use soap liquid detergent, if you know, anything that you choose really. The idea of the soap is that it's just going to help those fibres mat together and create our felt. So I'm going to get set up and I shall be right back. Okay, so we've got our soapy water. I've just used a small drop of washing up liquid in there. The water is fairly warm to touch, on the hotter side of warm, I would say, rather than cool. Make sure obviously it's easy and comfortable for you to put your hands in. And what we're going to do is we're going to take one end of our 50cm length of merino, and I'm just going to dab that in the water like that. Get it quite wet, and then drop a little bit of soap on the rest there. We're going to take it, pop it into the centre of our hand, just use our fingers to rub it. And you will find that really quite quickly it starts to felt. And what it's doing here are the fibres are sticking together, because on wool fibre you have lots of scales on each hair, and when you're felting, these stick together and form essentially a dreadlock really. So it's a bit like dreadlocking your hair, only you're doing it with sheep's hair. So then I just carry on dabbing the rest as I go, and little by little rub it in between my hands, and you will get more of a dreadlock. And you continue this until you've done the whole length. So I'll pop back in a minute when I've done that. Okay, so once you get to this stage where you've got this kind of wriggly worm, and it's kind of not quite solid, but you can see a shape forming, then you can get rid of that soapy water, because you've probably got enough soap in there so that if you rub your hands, you'll see soap residue on your fingers. So you've got enough in there just to work with it as it is, and you're just going to carry on rubbing and felting your cord. So you carry on in this process. It's probably going to take you somewhere between 10 minutes, 15 minutes to do. This is great to do with kids, because it's something that they can easily do and see results from. And if you're making dreadlocks, then this is exactly how you would make them. Wool dreadlocks, this is. But we're going to use this today for bracelets. If you made something longer, you could make a cord for a belt, or you could make necklaces as well. So we're just going to continue like this, and then we're going to continue until it's much harder and much smaller as well. So I'm just going to disappear for a second and come back once I've finished. What I will do once I have finished is rinse it under cold water, because we want to get rid of the soap, and then the next stage will be drying. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so I'm back and I've felted this probably as far as this one's going to go. So there are probably a couple of questions you had in the process. One I normally get asked is, how much soap is too much soap to use in felt making? Well, the answer is this: if your hands are sliding over soap bubbles and over this and not really able to grip it properly, then you've got too much soap. Too little soap and you're causing friction on your hands and you'll be able to feel it. So you want something somewhere in between, where this rolls through your hands very easily, because you want to cause friction on this so that you're actually causing the fibres along the length to compact and to felt. That's what you want. Another question I get asked quite a lot is, how long do I need my starting piece of merino top to be? Well, for this particular example I used 50 centimetres, and if I measure that now, I'm just going to reach across and get my measuring tape. It has shrunk from 50 centimetres to 34 centimetres. So that's quite an amount of shrinkage. Nothing is ever strict and accurate with this, so you always need to test. But I would say if it's too long, then we're going to look at probably tying the ends and creating something fancy like that, or looping over the ends and adding buttons and things like that, so that we use a lot of the excess of the fibre braid within the bracelet, or maybe making a feature out of it, because you might be able to, you know, sort of curl it up and stitch it and so on, and, you know, do something pretty with it. The other thing as well that I get asked is, how is best to dry this? I would just leave it to dry on a windowsill. It'll probably take a good few days to solidly dry all the way through, because the wool does like to hold water. Don't put it on top of a radiator, because wool will melt, and it will melt and become a sticky mess on top of your radiator, so please don't do that. The other thing as well is, don't stick it out on the line and peg it, because the moment you constrict this in any way, as it dries, it's going to start to form the shape. You can see there already it's sort of asking, you know, what are you wanting me to do? So I would leave it probably like that on a tea towel on the windowsill. Ideally a nice sunny spot would dry that out much more quickly for you. Okay, so now we're going to look at closures for this one. Okay, so the two easiest closures are to buy either a bracelet fastening, which you'll be able to get from most jewellery supply companies, something like that, where it just hooks through, and then all you would do with the ends is literally pop them through your finding, and then I've sewn them on and tried to be clever about hiding my ends with matching threads, and you would do the same on the other end, and probably be a little bit better at me at trimming off your knots and things. The other way is to create a loop fastening yourself, and this way would probably be easier if your ends are slightly too thick to go through the findings. So you would take one end, loop it over, and then sew that down just there, and then on the other end you would attach a button. You can either loop it through a finding like that, if you've got a button with a nice big open shank, or you would sew it onto just the end here, and make sure that it's really secure, and then that way you can fasten your bracelet like that. So that's one example of that. Another one is to be more fancy with your button and have something like that. So those are two fairly simple ways of closing your bracelet. What I'm going to do is just to tie mine. So what I would do is I would put my arm down, make sure that I've got enough of an idea of how tight to go. So you probably want the knot to be about there. So if I tie that now, you could tie this when it's wet. That doesn't need to be dry for you to tie that knot. So I'm going to tie that and try that on. That's probably a bit loose. So just undo it and tighten it up. There we go. Wool felt is not overly stretchy, but it will stretch on, and once this is dry it won't stretch any more than this because you've compacted it so much. It also shouldn't shrink because you've felted it probably as far as you can take it. So I'm going to leave it like that, and then once I have dried it, I'll probably sew down the ends. So then all I've got to do is just slip it on and off my wrist. So that's how to make felted rope, which you can turn into bracelets, necklaces or belts. And coming up are a couple more examples of bracelets that I've made. So I hope you found that helpful. If you have, please do give it a thumbs up over on YouTube, and pop over to sarahstexturecrafts.com, where I've got merino in like 101 colours, guys, so there's plenty for you to choose from, and feel free to ask me any questions. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.